Hi everyone, I'm really happy to introduce you to my guest of today. We have Karen Chaston with me, and she's a business owner, Beyond Law's mentor, and international keynote speaker. And I'm really excited to chat with her because she had been on stage with some really big names, including Marianne Williamson, Jamie Lee Curtis, Valerie Harper, and Dr. Ellie, to name a few. So I mean, I don't know how it's going to be on the same stage or like in the same event these people, because I think I love public speaking, but it still sometimes I can get me really nervous. So anyway, not the major focus for today, but can't help it. I'm all script sometimes. But anyway, she's also an author for 8 books, probably more now, and or working on some more, and numerous ebooks, as well as online TV show host and podcaster. So you can tell she has been busy working and sharing her work. And in her corporate career earlier, she was a CPA, CFO of a publicly listed company, and a senior manager for more than 25 years. So definitely she has a very solid background in the corporate world, but she also have probably hand in hand that you've been obviously very productive and effective in your life, and you have written 8 books after that. So but so today I'm really pleased to have her as my guest. About 9 years ago, her life have changed forever with a tragedy hit. And within 15 months, she resigned from her CFO and began a personal, professional, and spiritual journey. And that's, I think, leading her to become a Beyond Loss expert and co-founding her business called Live Love by Design. So today I'm very grateful to have you as my guest, Karen. So welcome to my show.
Thank you, Susie. I'm so glad to be here. It's exciting. We've known each other probably for what, about 5-7 years now, something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
So great to be on your show, and you're doing so well.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think when we first met, podcast wasn't a thing yet, but
no, I think there was a few people doing it, and we were all like looking at them in awe, but now, let's face it, it's so easy, isn't it? We've got to love the world we live in. We have so many things at our fingertips that we can not only connect with other people, we can share our thoughts, we can do so much, but, globally, not just locally, we can do it all over the world. And it's nice to be able, especially for women, to find our voice and to share what we're thinking and what we're feeling and our lives with everyone.
Yeah, so that really leads to my very first question I want to ask you. So we mentioned it a little bit early on that about 9 years ago, you had a big tragedy in your life and really turned things upside down and lead you to become, I would say, probably a major part lead you to become who you are today. And if it's okay with us, can you share a little bit about that tragedy or that experience? Because you also talked about how now women can find their voice and share. And I think that's and also the second part of the equation, that you may have a life experience, you overcome a big challenge, but then in the past, it may not be the same. Well, now we have much more opportunity and different platform that we can share. So tell us a bit about your experience.
Okay, so, well, thank you, because back in 2011, it was actually the 10th of July, 2011, so it's just over 9 years ago. My husband and I woke up and we thought we were going to have a lazy Sunday at home. Though within 15 minutes, we had found our youngest son by a minute, because he has a twin brother, Josh, and an older brother, Ben. We had found Dan. We thought initially he was just passed out at our back door, but, within minutes the paramedics arrived and they actually said that he had passed away several hours earlier, which is pretty traumatic. Most people are like, that's the last thing you want. We thought a healthy 27-year-old had gone out the night before with his mate separately to his girlfriend. But what had happened, and it took us a long time to figure out exactly what happened, and to be quite honest, Dan actually told me from the other side what actually did happen, which is interesting. And I know a lot of people, a lot of listeners may not be into that and don't understand that, but I'm so grateful that I have such a huge spiritual side to me. And so what had happened, he had drunk too much, he'd come home, he leant down to pick up his key. For some reason, he left it at home, so his girlfriend left one out for him. And as he leant down, he fell over and everything shook up. And unfortunately, his lungs failed him. He couldn't catch his breath, so he did pass away. And 2 years previously, he'd been in Scotland and he'd had pneumonia, where he had spent a week in hospital. And at the autopsy the next day, they actually shared with us that his lungs were so bad that if he had smoked full on for, say, 10, 15 years, which he hadn't, he was only a social smoker, he couldn't have done a quarter of the damages to the lungs. They also shared that he had a benign tumour on his brain, which none of us knew about. He was complaining about headaches every now and then, but that was about all. So, yeah, as you can imagine, it's, it was a mother's worst nightmare. You have young children, and it certainly is the last thing any parent expects. My mother at Dan's funeral was like, what's going on here? He's meant to be at my funeral. I'm not meant to be at his. So it is something that we never, ever really expect. And the way I coped with it was I just went straight back to work. I was a CFO of a publicly listed company then, and I just ate more, drank more, and worked even harder, which was not ideal, but if you look at the way most people cope with any sort of loss, that's what we do. We listen to the old cliches, just keep busy, just give it time, everything will work out. And of course, it's not that way. And then I now know that Dan's passing was meant to have been my wake-up call. And as I didn't wake up, as I continued into what I like to call my Groundhog Day days, they had to send me another tragic event. So 15 months after Dan passed, I had a choice to make. And the company that I was working for, which I really loved, and I was a really good accountant, I have to say, they said to me, Karen, you won't be the CFO in the new company because two companies were merging together, but you will be doing everything you're doing now and more. And I just went, oh, that's okay. I don't really care what my title is, until they said, you'll be doing it for 2/3 of your current salary. And Susie, that was the best gift they ever gave to me, because I was really peeved for a day, 2 days at the most. But then I started to realise that, you know what, I'm only there for the money. And if I'm honest, I'm wasting most of it just to get through the day, just to cope with the stress and to do things. So I chose redundancy. And I'm so glad that even though, I was so diseased and I didn't even realise how diseased I was. And most of us in that space don't realise, because everyone is exactly the same. They're all in there, in that motion, and we all know how dense it can be in the corporate world. So, yeah, I chose me, and that's when I started on this journey that I love to call the journey to becoming my own best friend, where I really did deep dive into me, into all areas of my life, and I realised that I was living in one area of my life. In the Live, Love, By Design model, I have 9 areas of life. And I was living in one, probably 85%, which is my professional space. And it's not good. My health was bad. My wealth wasn't great because I wasn't really, looking at it. My relationships were quite fragile. So that's why I just love who I am now more than anything else. And along that journey, and that hasn't been an easy journey, I decided that, you know what, the best way that I can help others, and the reason why everything has happened to me, was so that I could go finding an easier way for other people to move beyond their loss. And that's what I do now. And I just love it. I love helping people to have a new perspective around loss.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. So let's unpack it a little bit because I think a lot of questions based on that. So first of all, I have been thinking while I was preparing this. By the way, listeners, this is the first time we completely have no like draft question, draft scripts because we just decided spontaneously let's do this. And normally we would have some questions prepared, but so this time it's quite spontaneous. So, but I really wanted just before we came on, I was preparing. I wanted to ask you something to do with grief, but in the sense that some people fight it, some
Mm-hmm.
people say surrender to it, some people deny it in a way, like
Yep.
what you were
Yep.
saying about your initial response. So
Yep.
now, after knowing your own experience and walk through the whole tunnel, like what would you say for those who maybe experience big challenge or tragedy as such, like how to look grief in the face and go through it, or what helped you to manage pulling yourself from the dark night of the soul into the light after, like,
Yep.
so tell us a bit more about that.
Okay, so first of all, everything I did is not what I advise other people to do now. I did it literally the hard way, which is why I went looking. But I also looked back, and it's really interesting. My grandfather passed away when I was 13,
Mm-hmm.
and he died 6, which, was in the early 70s. And he died 6 months after his oldest son passed. So he had 6 children. He had 2 girls. The oldest and the youngest was the girl, and the youngest girl is my mum. And he had 4 boys in the middle. So his oldest son had passed, and 6 months later, my grandfather passed. And he died from a broken heart. From his son dying, he never got over it. So that was really in my psyche. So I knew that I was not going to die from a broken heart from my children passing. I knew that there had to be a better way. And yeah, sure, initially I ignored it. But I also knew that there had to be a better way. So when I went searching, and I found a lot of different things, and in my 5-step process that I walk people through, I call it the gift of loss. I found that the first thing that everyone should do, and most people do not do it because for centuries we have not been doing it this way, the first thing is to stop. You've got to stop. Because when we stop, first of all, we will take our conscious, loving breath. You know the one where you breathe deep down into your belly and you actually activate the nerve endings of the hypothalamus gland, which goes all the way up to our brains. So we enact our wisdom, we enact our love, and we start to ask those beautiful questions. What has happened? What does this mean for me now and going forward? Now, if you look at the recent pandemic that we've all been in, what were we all told to do?
Stay at home. Stop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just stop, right? And you think of the way we've been living our lives for the last 50, 70 years, we've all been getting busier and busier and busier and busier. So this pandemic, from my perspective, isn't a bad thing because it's getting us all to stop. And the ones who are stopping and doing it with ease are the ones who have already started to do the deep dive into themselves. They've started to realise that it's not such a scary place. Though more importantly, they have also started to realise that that's where all their answers are. We're all so busy looking outside of ourselves that we forget to go within. We're the only ones that have the wisdom for ourselves. But we never really look there. Well, I'm not going to say we never really look there. Not many of us choose to look there because it's scary and we're not really sure who we're going to find. But the beautiful thing is as you work through it, and I know you've done the work, as we work through it, we end up finding this amazing person, because we start to take off all the layers that we put on just to survive in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you feel?
Like we're too busy to keep doing, but we actually haven't really go within to know who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. So that's why, you know, books like Know Your Why from Simon Sinek and themes like that become so popular these days, because we're starting to ask those questions. And you know, that really leads to something else I want to ask you. When after a while, probably not immediately, like, you know, looking at the tragedy about your son's passing,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, you take the eventually you have to take the time to pause and to be still and then think about it. And do you see the whole, do you subscribe in the school of thought where, you know, certain people come into your life and leave your life for a reason, and some people say this is completely nonsense, and you know, there's
Yeah.
some of us look at it as in, whether it's good things or bad thing happen, there is a reason behind it, and it's part of it is a destiny, part of it is fate. You have choice point, but a lot of the some of the big things you don't. But then how you're going to live with it and respond after, you have that choice. So what's your take on that one?
Okay, well, this one's probably going to throw a lot of people a little bit, even more so, into spirituality. So I've actually even gone further. I honestly believe that Dan and I designed this while we were still on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
When we were planning our life, we were actually planning for him to pass at a certain age to assist me to wake up from where I was, from what I was doing, so I could then do what I'm doing now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of my greatest passions, right, is to get this understanding into the corporate space.
Mm.
Okay, so that they can start to value their employees. I've worked for a lot of companies. I know, and as a senior manager, I was 2IC, I was the CFO of a publicly listed company. So I understand how the board and the senior management tick. And I also understand that in a lot of companies, they do not value their employees. They see them as replaceable, and they treat them as though they're replaceable. They don't value their opinions. They tell them what to do. They micromanage them in a lot of cases. So I now know that when we start to look as humans as our most valuable asset in any company, right, we can not only create more profits, a better work environment, but we will actually become more innovative. We will become an amazing workplace. But we need to understand our people. We need to, first of all, understand that they're not one-dimensional, they're three-dimensional. And with that comes a lot of stuff. There is over 40 different loss events that can affect our lives. Now, when you hear that, when I first heard that, I went, no way, there can't be 40. You know, sure, we know about the most common 6 ones: the death of a loved one, a divorce, a job loss, your health, your wealth, and your pets. But if you look at this pandemic, some of the minor ones have come up: loss of freedom, loss of choice, loss of status, changing work conditions, changing social activities, changing recreational activities, and there's more and there's more and there's more. So when we start to understand that a lot of things that happen in our life are actually loss, when we're not, and when they happen to us, we can then understand why we're feeling the way we are, and we can start to feel there's not something wrong with me. I'm actually in a grief situation. So if I actually look at this as grief, and I can very quickly work through it, right? It doesn't have to take a lot of time. This is just a belief that we have built up over centuries because that's the way people acted. If I could have done the 5-step process on the day that Dan had passed, and I would not have grieved and suffered. Sure, I still have sadness around Dan, right? Sadness is completely different to grieving and suffering. And that's the difference. So when we understand this of our people and of our family and of our friends, we no longer have to say, will you stop talking about that? Haven't you moved on? Why haven't you moved on from this, whatever has happened in your life? We can understand, we can say to people, we will be more comfortable around loss because we can say, do you know what? You can actually do, and it's really easy to, once you know the 5-step process.
So I'm definitely going to ask you more about the 5-step in a minute. But before that, I want to say a couple of things. One is that I don't find it weird at all. I guess I'm in the same field as you.
Yes.
You have shared the same view about, a lot of the things that we experience or meant to tackle the biggest lesson. We actually have decided
Yes.
it, sign off some sort of soul contract before we were born. And most likely with your family, say, okay, so I need to learn self-reliance. So yes, let's have you abandon me, or okay, I'm going to exit early so you can learn about how to share this gift. So okay, that sounds good, and you agree with the whole soul family, and then you go.
But Susie, don't you think at times, why the hell did I sign up for this?
But that's the thing, because our perspective as human is that this is good, that's bad, this is long, that's short. But in spirit form, they say, no, this is a really great lesson, let's do this, rather than, oh, this is really painful, let's don't do it. They have a different perspective, or I think we forget about that perspective. And so for us, it's quite two-dimensional, long and short. And therefore, that's too short. And so that's one thing. I completely agree with your view. And a lot of times I think with that view, a lot of those things that we think is terrible can turn out to be the blessing, because that leads to different things. So change your perspective. So first of all, I agree with you. I don't think it's weird at all. And if people think it's weird, think again, maybe it helps you. But the second thing,
change your perspective. But Susie, that's why I call my program The Gift of Loss.
Yes. And I think for some people it's hard to accept, but they should just hang on and listen further, because it may be like bring them gifts. But that leads to what I actually want to ask you. After saying that I completely agree with you, what I want to ask you is that, so let's say we get this view, we get it. Now, not us, but say our best friend or our boyfriend or our wife have something happened, they experience grief, and then we have this view, but you cannot tell people this view so quickly, especially if they have grief. And how would you, like, after working and teaching for so many years, how would you advise people, say the partner of those who experienced this tremendous loss and having such a different perspective, then how do they help them to get into the 5-step or whatever other things? So the partner that could be feeling very helpless, so what would you say to them?
How's it working for you?
Probably not good.
How is your belief working for you at this moment? Like, how are you feeling? Is it, are you able to get out of bed? Are you able to stop the feelings, the way that you are crying, the way that you are feeling so down? Is that working for you? And of course they're going to say no. The rest of my life is on hold because I don't know what to do. I don't know how to move on. So then the next thing is, would you like to try it a different way? Would you like to maybe just see if this works for you? And if it doesn't, what have you got to lose? Because doing loss the way that we've all been taught to do it, and we do it alone, and you've just got to look at our world. How is it working for all of us as a community? We have thriving alcohol and pharmaceutical industries. We have a suicide rate that is continually growing every year. So is the way we all experience loss, especially in the West, working for us? And I think most people will go, no, it's not. And I just say, well, how about we just look at it a different way and see if it works? And if it does, fabulous. And if it doesn't, well, you're no worse off than where you are right now.
Great. And I guess, like, from your experience, you created Live Love by Design. And can you tell us a
Yep.
little bit about what it means, what it entails? And also, I think within that business, you have the Beyond Loss program.
Yep.
So tell us all about it, the practical side of things. So if people wanted to find out more, they know what's next.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So the reason I called my business Live Love by Design is because I realized that I wasn't living and loving my life. And most of us don't take the time to actually design a life that we can live and love. Like most of us don't even take the time to actually decide what success means to us. We buy into everyone else's version of it and we wonder why it doesn't work for us. So that's why I purposely called my business Live Love by Design, because I wish that in my 20s I had actually taken the time to design it. Sure, it was probably going to need to be tweaked all the time because, as we said, things are going to happen to us that, you know, will throw us onto a different course and stuff like that. But it is the fact that once you're consciously that, well, I'm designing my life to live and to love it, I will just continually move it or tweak it or do whatever. So before I go into the Beyond Lost program and the Gift of Loss 5 steps, it's really important for every one of us to know and to remember, because I'm a great believer we already know everything. It's just a matter of us remembering it. So for every relationship, there's 2 people in every relationship, but there's 3 aspects to every relationship that we all need to be aware of. The first one is the physical aspect. And that's the way that we hang out together, the things we do, the things we say, and the way we touch each other. The second aspect is the emotional aspect. And that's the way that we feel about each other. And it's all encompassing of all of our feelings. And as we know, with every relationship, we will go through all of the different feelings, the good, the bad, the glad, and the sad. And then the third aspect is the spiritual part. Now, that's the intangible. Like, we know we're connected. We're not really sure why. We just know that we are connected to this person, place, or thing. Like, we connected from the first time we met each other. Didn't we? We
The
instantly
intuition,
went, hey,
the inner knowing, that's this thing you cannot put your finger on it.
Exactly. We don't really know why, but we just know, you know what? She's my sort of girl. She's probably part of my soul family, if, you know, for us to go that far. So when the loss event occurs, and it doesn't matter what the loss event is, the physical relationship ends, because you will no longer hang out together the way you used to. You'll no longer speak to each other, touch each other, all of those things that you did before. Whether they're dead or alive, it doesn't matter. The physical relationship will change. So if you looked at death or divorce, the physical will change. Though the emotional and the spiritual will live on forever. And what causes us to grieve and suffer is our emotional relationship, because our unconscious mind goes into this emotional loop, right, of continually saying, why did I say that? Why didn't I say that? Why did I do that? Why didn't I do that? Why did we postpone that? Why did we take that action? Why did we take this inaction? So it continually goes until you complete the relationship. So what my Gift of Loss 5-step process does, it assists you to have a healthy emotional relationship moving forward, because we complete all of those things that we are more than likely unconscious of. We bring them to the conscious through the 5 steps, so that you can then complete them, and then you can have a healthy emotional relationship moving forward. Now, for every single person who is listening and is divorced and does not have a good relationship with, because easily emotional relationship with any relationship, and that's the key of this process. And of course, once we know the process, we have the rest of our lives. And the fact that loss is going to continually keep coming to you, Isn't it amazing just to have a process that go, oh, okay, right, I'm in loss. These are the 5 steps. Thank you very much, Karen. I can do them by myself. I can move on, have a healthy emotional relationship. Right, let's go on.
Yeah, definitely. Like whether it's loss of loved ones or divorce, or let's say not divorce, but things that happen in your life, there will be difficult times in your life. It could be losing a
Yes.
job, or it could be losing a house, whatever that is, and or not losing it, but there will be times where we feel emotionally we're sad.
Yeah, you're right. Moving house is one of the 40 loss events. House, you've decided to downsize. House is an extension of you. Of course you. So you do the process and you honor it and you move on, and then you have a healthy emotional relationship, and that's is to stop that grieving and suffering and stop that unconscious rhythm that is causing them to grieve and suffer.
So I think that really helps for me to hear that if people or my listeners hear that if they're going through something really challenging, that it really can really help them.
Yeah, because it's just the deep dive in, asking yourself the right questions, coming up with the right answers, and you'll come up with a list that you will realize that you like to acknowledge. And what relationship is about, it's like our heartbeat. It's up and down, up and down. And to what it's what it's about. And it's about honouring yourself as much as the other person in that relationship.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit more about your the programs you run. So if people want to take the next steps, what they involve and all that.
Lead it into my retreats or their life easier in all areas. So I have face-to-face at the moment, not at the moment. And when this all happened, I thought my face on it. So I took it all online. There's less work and all that sort of stuff. It's really important for people to understand that all of my programs are people who are willing to invest in themselves, not only money, but time. And because you've got to be prepared to take the time to deep dive in and to do all of the work, right? Because if you don't, so many people invest money in themselves, but they're not prepared to do the action steps. And nothing is going to happen unless you do the action steps. You've got to act, to move forward. Just paying the money doesn't make it work. So, and I clearly say that to people. Are you prepared to do this? Because at times it's going to be tough. It is going to be tough because we realize that it's so easy to blame, isn't it? So easy to blame. I love to break down words. And if you break down the word blame, you have blah and you have me. Now, most people, when they're in the blame game, they go blah, 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 blah. And they forget about me because it's else's fault except themselves. And that's what you take responsibility for what is always making our life bigger and better. And that's what I say everyday life, because that's what I help people do. Is this is what happened. It was a deal, no matter what it was. And sure, I'd love to have Dan. Yeah, his twin brother is married and I want that Dan. Of course I would. But do you know what? I give him all my credit for everything I do. I'm a completely different person to who I was before. I limited myself in my corporate space. I would look at the CEO and I'd go, wow, look at him, or look at her. Look at them standing out there in front of people. There's no way I could do that. And now look at me. You can't get me off the stage. You've got to get the hook out to drag me off, sort of thing. But it's because we do limit ourselves. We don't realize how much we do. So that's what I help people to see how beautiful they are, and to get rid of that baggage that we all carry around for so long.
Well, thank you so much. I think it really go back to, what we talked about at the very beginning. Sometimes the loss that we experience is not one dimensional. It brings other kind of gift, but also the most important thing is take a pause to really figure out what it means to us, and who are we, who am I, and who I want to be next. So kind of like the conversation go back to all the way home about knowing that take a pause, just stop doing what you're doing and think about it. It's probably the most important step. And sometimes even if without having particular challenge, just the everyday life, we need to take a pause, so that we check in, we tune in, and we know who we are and what we're doing. So thank you so much for your
thank you for having me. I love to wisdom.
And so if people want to connect with you directly, or come to your webinars, or know more about you, what's the best way to connect with you online?
Okay, so I've got two websites, livelovebydesign.com and karenchaston.com. Chaston spelled Chaston. And my webinar is simply karenchaston.com/webinar.
And I will put all the links on the blog post, so people don't have to worry about the spelling. They can just click.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for today. And I think, a lot of people who are experiencing something difficult in their life, or if their partner or friends and family are experiencing this conversation will be very valuable for them as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.